Okay, so now I'm going to show you a bit on how to wedge. I want you to know that normally at a ceramic studio, you would have a big plaster table to wedge on top of. And so you'll just probably only have the surface that you're working with in your in home studio. So, one thing to make sure is to just have your surface be dry to start because if when you're wedging, the reason to wedge clay is to not only to get rid of any air pockets that might be in your recycled clay, but to also just mix up the molecules and the moisture of the clay so it's all just very evenly dispersed and becomes nice and plastic for us to work with again. So in order to wedge clay, like I said, just have a dry surface to start. Have your clay, your recycled clay, and I recommend standing up. I am standing up right now in order to wedge because it does take a little bit of arm power and hand power, and the momentum of your body and the force of your body while you wedge is something that will make wedging easier on your hands. So you just want to start by smacking the clay and compressing it into a nice ball, just like the way that we started with making a pinch pot. Do something that just start by using the amount of clay that your hands can hold. The better you get at wedging, the more clay you can wedge at a time, but just to start. So I'm using this bony part of my hand to pack the clay in. And I expect my table to maybe rock a little bit, but that's okay. So once you have your ball of clay, this is another thing you can do to make a ball, just kind of roll it like this. Once you have your nice ball of clay, you start by, this is actually, there's a few different types of wedging techniques, but this is the ram's head or ram's horn technique, which is the one that's more kind of common. It doesn't take as much, it's supposed to be just a little bit easier than the spiraling technique, but that's where we're gonna start. So I start by grasping the two sides of the sphere with kind of like not my fingers, but with my wrist. And that part of my wrist that can like wrap around the clay, I start by bracing that with two hands. So then I kind of lift the clay up and I push down and I get this shape. I get like a duckbill shape. After I push down, I roll the clay towards myself. So the duckbill shape kind of comes up a little bit. And then, so I created some gravity here. So what I want to do is that same way I was holding the sphere to start is wrap that part of my wrist or the palm of my hand around the very top of it. And I push. And then I pull it back and I push. And I pull it back and I push. And you just keep on repeating that over and over again. Even though some of my clay is sticking to the oilcloth, but I can just stick that back in there. And it'll eventually look like a ram's head. So, right, there's like these two big horns and then there's kind of like a little mouth or whatever. So that is essentially how you wedge clay. Nothing really crazy to it. It might take a little bit of practice, or if anything, it'll just feel kind of awkward at first. But after you try it a little bit, it is fairly easy. And I just recommend wedging your clay until you feel like you don't want to wedge it so much that it gets too dry, but just until you can feel it in a nice, evenly dispersed moisture without any chunks or any bits in it, hard chunks or any hard bits in it. And that's how you wedge clay back into a nice sculptable form.